The first thing I smelled wasn't the cedar-scented candle I'd lit to make Sunday dinner feel like a sanctuary. It was the sharp, metallic tang of a 2018 Cabernet Sauvignon, atomizing in the air a split second before it slammed into my eyes. It wasn't just a drink, it was an execution. One moment, I was Allison Bennett, the 29-year-old daughter who had finally clawed her way into a life of her own making. The next, I was a blurred shape behind a crimson veil, the acidic liquid burning into the pores of my skin and soaking into the fibers of my silk cream blouse, a shirt that cost me 3 nights of overtime. Through the stinging blur of my vision, I didn't see my father's face first. I saw the glowing rectangular eye of a smartphone. My sister Natalie wasn't reaching for a napkin. She wasn't gasping in horror, she was framing the shot. Her thumb was dancing across the screen, ensuring the lighting caught the way the wine dripped off my chin and onto the white tablecloth like a crime scene. "Oh my God, guys, look at her face!" she whispered to her digital audience, her voice dripping with a rehearsed, honeyed pity that tasted worse than the vinegar in my mouth. This is what happens when someone values bricks and mortar over their own blood. My father's fork hit his china plate with a sound like a gunshot. "Hand your apartment over to your sister, Allison," he repeated, his voice devoid of the heat that was currently radiating from the wine on my skin. "She deserves it more. She has a calling. You just have a job." The word no hadn't even finished vibrating in my throat before the world exploded into red. That was the moment I realized that in the Bennett household, love wasn't a gift. It was a currency. And I had been bankrupt since the day I was born. But as I sat there, dripping and humiliated in front of thousands of strangers on a live stream, a cold, hard knot tied itself in my stomach. They thought they were breaking me. They didn't realize they were just finally showing me exactly who they were. Have you ever realized, in a single heartbeat, that the people who were supposed to protect you were actually the ones holding the knife? Growing up in our house was a lesson in the architecture of invisible hierarchies. I learned early on that fairness was a ghost, something people talked about in books but never actually permitted to walk through our front door. My childhood wasn't marked by abuse in the traditional sense. It was marked by a steady, surgical erasure. When Natalie forgot her chores, it was a charming quirk of her artistic soul. Dad would chuckle, ruffling her hair, and tell her she was too busy dreaming of the stage to worry about the trash. But if I missed a single smudge on a dinner plate, I was back at the sink until midnight, the scent of lemon soap etched into my skin, scrubbing until my cuticles bled. At 16, while Natalie was being chauffeured to parties, I was balancing trays of greasy burgers at a local diner. Every single tip, every sticky dollar bill went into a cracked ceramic jar hidden under my bed. It wasn't fun money. It was my get out of here fund. That same year, my parents bought Natalie the latest smartphone. They called it a school necessity, claiming her acting classes required her to record her monologues. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my own flip phone cracked and dying, asking why I didn't get one for my design projects. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. His answer was the refrain of my entire life. "She needs it more, Allison. You're practical. You'll figure it out. Natalie is one different." I was practical. That was the word they used to justify every sacrifice they demanded of me. It was a compliment they used as a shackle. When I was 18, I was offered a prestigious design internship in the city. It was the kind of door that only opens once. But that summer, Natalie decided she needed private acting coaching from a disgraced Broadway veteran who charged $300 an hour. "We can't afford the gas to drive you to the city and pay for her lessons," my mother said, her voice soft and lethal. "And Natalie's acting matters more right now. This is her window. You can always do your little drawings later." I didn't argue. I worked doubles at the diner instead. I watched from the sidelines as Natalie's failures were cushioned by my parents' savings, while my milestones passed like shadows in the night. No one threw a party when I got into college. No one cheered when I made the dean's list. They were too busy celebrating Natalie's callback for a toothpaste commercial she didn't even get. By 22, the divide was a canyon. While I was drowning in student loans and working 3 jobs just to afford textbooks, my parents surprised Natalie with a brand new car. I can still see the sun glinting off the silver hood, the way the keys sparkled in her manicured hand as she squealed. I was standing there in my bus uniform, sweat-stained and exhausted from a 10-hour shift. "Don't be jealous, Allison," my mother whispered, catching the look on my face. "Family supports each other. It's not a competition." But it was. It was a competition where the rules were rigged, and I was the only one playing fair. Support in our house was just a polite word for my sacrifice. I started to wonder if they even saw me as a person, or if I was just a biological ATM, designed to fund the whims of their golden child. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own living room, watched only when you were expected to perform a service? At 24, I didn't move out for independence. I moved out for survival. I needed to breathe air that didn't taste like Natalie's entitlement. I built my design studio from the ground up, literally. My first office was a card table in a studio apartment that smelled like damp wool and old cigarettes. I worked through the night, fueled by black coffee and the kind of spite that burns cleaner than gasoline. I took every soul-crushing gig, logo designs for $5, layout edits for people who didn't know what a font was. I lived off cheap takeout and the singular, driving ambition to never have to ask my father for a dime. And then, after 5 years of grinding, I did it. I bought my apartment. It wasn't just a piece of real estate, it was my first real safe place. It was the physical manifestation of every hour of sleep I'd lost and every insult I'd swallowed. But to the Bennetts, it wasn't my achievement. It was just another asset that hadn't been shared with Natalie yet. The week after that wine-soaked dinner, the world became a very small, very loud place. My phone became a hornet's nest. I wasn't getting pings for new design contracts. I was getting notifications from strangers who had seen the Selfish Sister video. Natalie hadn't just streamed the incident, she had edited it. She'd cut out my father's demand and started the clip right as I said no, followed by the wine splash. In her version, I looked like a cold-hearted mogul sneering at my struggling artistic sister. The captions were brutal. "Look at this gatekeeper." Or, "Imagine being this rich and letting your sister struggle." Natalie was the victim, the underdog, the brave creator, fighting against a heartless sibling. She thrived on it. She reposted the most hateful comments about me, adding little fire emojis and sad face filters. She was harvesting my shame for engagement. And my parents? They weren't just silent. They were the ones holding the ring light in the background. I tried to lose myself in work at the studio. I threw myself into sketches and client briefs, trying to ignore the way my hands shook every time a new notification popped up. Linda, my lead assistant, eventually slid a coffee across my desk, her eyes full of a pity I couldn't stand. "You okay, Allison? I saw the video." I forced a smile that felt like it was cracking my face in half. "I'm fine. Just family drama." But I wasn't fine. Silence at the Bennett house wasn't peace. It was the quiet before a siege. My mother started leaving these cryptic, haunting voicemails. "Allison, come over. We need to talk about Natalie's future. She's depressed. She needs a win." Future? She had spent the last decade wrecking mine, and yet the family was still rallying to build a bridge over her latest self-inflicted moat. Then came the night that changed the texture of my fear. There was a knock on my apartment door at 11 p.m. It wasn't the rhythmic knock of a neighbor. It was frantic, yet calculated. When I looked through the peephole, there she was. Natalie. She looked perfect, her makeup done specifically to look crying adjacent, and in her left hand, she was holding a portable ring light and her phone. "Special surprise, guys," she whispered into the camera, her eyes flicking to the door. "I'm here to see if my sister has a heart after all." I didn't open it. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and listened to her stream from my hallway for 20 minutes. She called me a coward. She told her followers she could hear me breathing on the other side. She made my sanctuary feel like a cage. The next morning, the rot began to seep into my professional life. Clients started asking discreet questions. "Everything okay at home, Allison? We saw some interesting stuff online." I swallowed my pride and nodded, but the cracks were widening. Strange things started happening. Bills arrived for high-end skincare subscriptions I'd never ordered. Damage charges from a rental car company I hadn't used. Natalie hadn't just taken my dignity. She'd taken my old spare key from the family house. I changed the locks that afternoon, my heart hammering against my ribs, but a part of me wondered if Dad had already made another copy. I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the streetlights outside felt like an invasion. I wasn't afraid of a burglar, I was afraid of my own blood. And the worst part, I started to doubt my own reality. Am I being the difficult one? Is it really that big of a deal to help her? That's the poison of a toxic family. They make you feel like your boundaries are actually betrayals. One night, I dreamt I walked into my living room and found a crowd of strangers sitting on my sofa. They were all holding phones, cheering as Natalie tossed my design portfolios out the window into the rain. I woke up gasping, my sheets drenched in sweat, realizing that my fear had followed me into the only place I had left to hide. I kept asking myself, how far would they go? How much of my life did they think they were entitled to? I thought the wine was the peak of the mountain. I didn't realize it was just the first snowfall. And then my grandfather called. The night my grandfather stepped in should have been the end of the war, but instead, it was the moment the fuse reached the powder keg. You don't deserve this, Allison, he told me over the phone, his voice a gravelly anchor in the storm. No one does. Your father has lost his way, and Natalie is a fire that will burn whatever you give her. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But when I arrived back at my apartment that evening, exhausted from a day of damage control with clients, I slid my key into the lock and it wouldn't turn. I froze. I tried again, my knuckles turning white. Nothing. The cylinder didn't even budge. My breath hitched, a cold spike of adrenaline shooting through my chest. I pressed my ear to the door, and that's when I heard it. Music, her music, and then that sharp, mocking laugh that had haunted my childhood. Natalie. I didn't just knock, I pounded. Open the door, Natalie. Open this door right now. The hallway light overhead flickered, casting long, distorted shadows. My heart was thumping so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The door finally cracked open, and there she was. She was wearing my favorite silk robe, the one I bought myself after my first big contract. She was leaning against the frame, the red recording light on her phone glowing like a predator's eye. Well, look who finally showed up, she purred. Her eyes were glittering with a triumph so absolute it was terrifying. Welcome to the new studio, guys. Doesn't it look better already? I pushed past her, my eyes scanning the room. My couch had been moved. My artwork, sketches I'd spent months on, had been piled in the corner like trash. Her ring lights and tripods were set up in the center of the room. She hadn't just entered, she had colonized. How did you get in here? I demanded, my voice cracking. Natalie twirled a silver key between her thumb and forefinger. She looked at it like it was a holy relic. Mom gave me the spare. She said you weren't using the space effectively anyway. Funny how family comes through for you when you actually need it, right? The betrayal felt like a physical blow to the solar plexus. My mother, the woman who had tucked me in, who had told me to be the bigger person for 20 years, had handed over the keys to my life. Get out, I whispered. Then, louder, get out, Natalie, this is trespassing. She just smirked and turned back to her phone. See what I mean, guys? So much toxicity. Or what, Allison? You'll cry to Grandpa again? Go ahead. I'll be live in 10 minutes telling the world how you tried to make your own sister homeless in the middle of a mental health crisis. Think about the brand, Allison. Think about the followers. She slammed the door in my face. The sound vibrated through my bones. I sat in the hallway, staring at the closed door of my own home, the Allison Bennett design mat mocking me from the floor. Rage began to boil, hotter and more focused than the wine that had burned my skin. This wasn't just a sibling rivalry. This was a calculated attempt to strip mine my life for content. By morning, the digital nightmare had reached a fever pitch. Natalie was streaming from my kitchen, eating my food, mocking my minimalist decor. My selfish sister won't even share her apartment, even though she has so much, she told her audience, her voice dripping with fake tears. I'm just trying to chase my dreams, you know? I just need a base. But I know you all support me. The comments were a lynch mob. Give her the apartment. Success has made you a monster, Allison. Family is everything. How can you be so cold? Strangers were judging my soul based on a 30-second clip edited by a sociopath. My name started trending in local circles for all the wrong reasons. A major furniture brand I was supposed to collaborate with sent a concerned email. I wasn't just losing my home, I was losing the reputation I'd spent a decade building. I called my mother, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Patricia, tell me you didn't give her that key. Tell me you didn't do this. The silence on the other end was a confession. Allison, she finally said, her voice hard and brittle. She needs a chance. You have stability. You have your business. She has nothing. You're being so selfish about a few square feet of space. Stability? I bled for that apartment. I worked the shifts she was too artistic to take. You let her steal the one thing I earned for myself. Enough, my mother snapped. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Support your sister, Allison. That's what family does. We help the ones who are struggling, not the ones who are already ahead. I hung up. I realized then that to my parents, I wasn't a daughter. I was a safety net. And they were perfectly willing to let me fray and snap if it meant Natalie got a softer landing. That night, I didn't go to a hotel. I stayed in my car, parked across the street, watching the lights in my own window. I watched Natalie's silhouette dance across my walls. I realized then that there is no bigger person when you're dealing with people who want to consume you. There is only the person who survives. Would you have kept trying to talk to them? Or would you have realized, like I did, that the only way to win a war against people who don't follow the rules is to change the game entirely? The next morning, the drama turned into a crisis. My phone didn't just have notifications, it had cancellations. Allison, we love your work, but we can't afford to have our brand associated with this kind of public family scandal, a long-term client told me over the phone. Their voice was clinical, professional, and absolutely devastating. My stomach twisted into a knot of cold lead. Natalie wasn't just playing house in my apartment, she was dismantling my future for likes. I called my grandfather, my voice finally breaking. They're taking everything, Grandpa. They're actually taking everything. Not yet they aren't, he said. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of something other than fear. I'm calling Diane, Diane Hayes. I'd met her once at a family funeral. She was Grandpa's attorney, a woman who looked like she was carved out of flint and dressed in Chanel. When she met me an hour later, she didn't offer me a tissue. She offered me a legal pad. This isn't a family dispute, Allison, Diane said, her eyes tracking every detail of my lease papers. This is a criminal act. It's called unlawful occupation. And if your father provided the key knowing she intended to seize the property, he is an accessory to the fact. For the first time in days, hope didn't feel like a lie. Within 3 hours, Diane had drafted a cease and desist that read like a declaration of war. A process server, a man who looked entirely bored by the drama, taped it to my apartment door while Natalie was midstream. Of course, she didn't stop. She made a video of herself holding the letter, laughing. Look, guys, my sister is trying to sue me. Paper won't stop family love. She sneered, tossing the document over her shoulder like confetti. I burned with a fresh wave of shame as I watched the comments roll in, but Diane just smiled when I showed her. Good, she whispered. She just handed us a signed confession of her intent to ignore a legal order. Let her keep talking. My father doubled down. He hired a lawyer from his golf club, a man who spent 20 minutes in our first preliminary hearing talking about family duty and the spirit of the Bennett household. He argued that Natalie was simply borrowing unused space and that my reaction was a symptom of a deeper emotional instability. My mother sat in the back of the room, her face a mask of disappointment. She didn't look at me once. Her silence was a blade, slicing deeper than any of my father's shouting. The battle dragged on for a week. Natalie went live every night, painting me as a greedy, heartless mogul. My inbox became a sewer of venom. I was getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in high school, telling me I should be ashamed of myself. But then, court day arrived. The Toledo courtroom was small, smelling of old paper and floor wax, but the tension inside was thick enough to choke on. I sat beside Diane, my palms damp, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. Across the aisle, my father leaned back, his face smug, radiating the confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Natalie was next to him, tapping away on her phone, likely drafting her victory post. Their lawyer rose first. He spoke of familial bonds and the tragic breakdown of sisterly affection. He tried to frame me as a cold, calculating woman who was using the law to punish her less fortunate sibling. Then Diane rose. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just sliced. She didn't talk about love or family. She talked about property law. She presented my lease, my utility bills, and my bank statements showing every cent I'd paid for that apartment. And then, with the timing of a master executioner, she pulled out a tablet. She played the clips. Not the ones Natalie edited, but the ones Diane's team had archived. The ones where Natalie bragged about taking what she deserved. The ones where she mocked the legal system. And the ones where she admitted on camera that she knew she didn't have a right to be there. The judge, a woman who looked like she'd seen 1,000 family dramas and was tired of all of them, leaned forward. Her expression hardened as she watched Natalie laugh at the process server. This, the judge said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence, is not a misunderstanding. This is a blatant, unlawful occupation of a private residence. Natalie's smirk didn't just falter. It vanished. My father shifted in his seat, his face turning a mottled purple. Miss Natalie Bennett, the judge continued, you are hereby ordered to vacate the premises within 48 hours. If you are found on the property after that time, you will be arrested for trespassing. She turned her gaze to my father. And Mr. Stephen Bennett, since you admitted to facilitating this violation, you are ordered to pay a $750 fine and complete 6 months of probation, including mandatory anger management classes. The words hit the room like a hammer. My father leapt up, his chair screeching against the floor. This is ridiculous. You can't do this to a family. Sit down, Mr. Bennett, the judge said, her voice like ice. Or you'll spend the night in a cell where family won't be able to help you. Natalie's face literally crumbled. Her followers couldn't save her now. Her ring lights couldn't filter out the reality of a court order. And me? For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide turn. But as I looked at my parents, at the raw, naked hatred in my father's eyes and the coldness in my mother's, I realized that winning in court was just the beginning of a different kind of survival. Have you ever won a battle only to realize the prize was a pile of ashes? 2 days later, the sheriff stood in the hallway. It was a cold, clinical end to a very loud war. Natalie dragged out boxes of clothes, her filming gear, and her expensive espresso machine, all things I'd likely paid for in some roundabout way. Her face was pale, her phone clutched tight, but there was no live stream this time. The silence was deafening. My father hovered behind her, muttering under his breath about ingratitude and vultures. My mother trailed behind them both, her eyes fixed on the floor, refusing to acknowledge my existence. When the locksmith finished changing the barrels, Diane handed me the new set of keys. They felt heavy. You fought for what's yours, Allison, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. Don't ever let them make you feel guilty for holding on to your own life. I walked inside. I expected to feel a rush of victory. I expected to feel like I'd come home. Instead, I felt like I was walking into a tomb. Everything looked the same, yet everything was different. The couch where Natalie had sat to mock me felt tainted. The kitchen where she'd filmed her victim videos felt like a stage set. Even the air felt thick with the echoes of her laughter and my parents' betrayal. I'd reclaimed the square footage, but I'd lost the sanctuary. That night, I sat on the sofa in the dark. I realized that as long as I lived here, I would be looking at the scars of their entitlement. Every color on the walls carried the ghost of the wine stain. Every corner of the room was a reminder that my parents were willing to let me be destroyed for the sake of a lie. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable, I whispered to the empty room. For years, I'd accepted their crumbs because I was afraid of being alone. But sitting there in the silence, I realized that being alone was infinitely safer than being with people who viewed my success as their property. Weeks later, I listed the apartment for sale. The market was hot, and a young couple bought it within days. They were so excited, talking about where they'd put their first Christmas tree, their voices full of a hope I'd forgotten existed. I signed the papers without a single regret. With the money, I moved across town. I didn't buy a statement home. I rented a clean, quiet one-bedroom apartment with plain white walls and large windows that let in the morning light. No history, no ghosts, just space to breathe. Grandpa visited me often. He'd sit at my new kitchen table, sipping his coffee and nodding at the simplicity of the place. "You did the right thing, Allison," he told me one afternoon. "Family doesn't mean handing over everything you worked for. Family means respect. And when they don't give it, you don't argue. You draw the line." His words settled deep into my bones. I didn't just move, I disconnected. I blocked Stephen. I blocked Patricia. I blocked Natalie. No more messages. No more emergencies that required my bank account. No more guilt trips disguised as holiday invitations. Before I moved on completely, I had to accept one final truth. Desire whispers louder than guilt. My parents' desire for Natalie's success was louder than their guilt over my pain. And once I understood that, I was finally free.